Now that we know that we have a way to handle the press of a number, let's think about the logic behind this press. Every time we press a number, we would like to keep a running sum, and once this running sum is equal or greater than 28, we have two cases to handle. But before we actually handle that logic, let's handle the UI logic. So every time I press a number, what should the UI do? And for this particular game, the UI should show that this number is pressed because I can't actually press it again. Once I press it once, the UI should change the state of that number, and I can't press it again. Since the UI has to change, that means every time I press a number, something has to change on the state somewhere because I need React to re-render the view. So your next question becomes, what should we place on the state and where should we place that on the state? For example, can I place the value of the number on the state? Can I place this 6 here on the state? While it might work for this case, it won't work for this case because I have randomly selected numbers that are equal. So I can't place the 9 or the 6. I need to place the unique identifier for that number, and currently we are using the position of that number as the unique identifier of that number. If you remember, in the game component, we used the key index as the unique identifier for every random number. So when I click on this first 9, I should place the number 0 somewhere on the state that says the number with positional index 0 is now selected. Similarly, when I click on 10, I should say the number with positional index 5 is now selected. And since every time I am pressing on a number, I am adding this selected status to a structure, I need to maintain a collection of selected numbers. So I can do that with either an object or an array. Let's just simply use an array for selected numbers. Now, since the game component render all the numbers, it makes sense to place this array of selected numbers here on the state of the game component. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to initiate a state object here. And inside that state object, I'll plan on having a selected numbers array, which starts as empty array just like that. And every time I press a number, I'd like to push this pressed number to the selected numbers state property. Now I have two distinct tasks to do for this feature. The first task is to push a number to that selected numbers array every time I press the number. And the second task is to make the UI respect the values of selected numbers and change its content based on that values. For example, if the selected numbers array had the number 0 in it, that means the first random number has to be styled as selected, and also we cannot press it anymore. These two unique tasks, pushing to selected numbers and making the UI respect the values in selected numbers, can actually be implemented separately. And I always like to start with the second task. I always like to start with the data-related part of the change. So if I have data here in the selected numbers array, I'd like the UI to respect that data. The other task is behavior related. Once I have the UI respect the data, I'll figure out how to make it insert new data to this structure. A way to test that is to start with fake values. So let's start with the first one and the fifth element selected. And we'll make the UI respect that. Once we're done changing the UI to do so, we'll reinitialize this selected numbers as an empty array and figure out how to do the behavior. Okay, so how should the UI look differently when the number with indexes 0 and 4 are selected? Let's just change the opacity a little bit when we press a number. Sounds good? This means that inside this random number component, we want to change the opacity of the text here. So let's test that. Opacity is, let's go with 0.3 and see how that looks. So this actually looked good. Let's just do that. So I'm going to take this opacity part and make it into its own style. So let's call that selected style. And just put the opacity in here. We'll add this selected style only if the random number is selected. This means in here, we would like to conditionally add another style. So I'll change this into an array so that I have the option of adding another style. And the other style is only when the number is selected. So I need to figure out if the number is selected. Now to figure out if the number is selected, I need access to the selected numbers array that I just placed on the game state. So let's think about that just a little bit. To figure out if the number is selected, we need access to the selected numbers array. So the suitable place to actually figure out if the number is selected is right here in the game component. So let's create a new function. Call this function isNumberSelected. And this is a function, and it will basically receive the index to be checked. So let's call this numberIndex. And it will return true or false based on that. So the number is selected if this .state.selected numbers.index of the number index. If this is greater than or equal to 0, then the number is selected, right? Because if it's not selected, it's not part of the selected numbers array, this will be -1. So now we can actually compute the isNumberSelected for every number using this function. So I'll go ahead and do exactly that. On a new line, we'll do something like isSelected equal this dot isNumberSelected, the function that I just wrote, and calling that using the index for the current random number, which is here just index. And let me format that. So now I have, for every random number, I pass a property, which is just a Boolean, isSelected. So let's go ahead and define that property. In here, we'll need to define the property isSelected. This is prop types dot Boolean dot is required. It's always either true or false. And in here, to only include the selected style when the number is selected, we can do something like this dot props dot is selected and styles dot selected. Let me format all that in multiple lines. So only include styles dot selected if the isSelected Boolean property is true. If it's false, React Native is going to just ignore that, false. All right, let's try it. And there you go. The number with index 0 and the number with index 4 are both selected and the other numbers are not. So this is part 1 of the task, making the UI respect data element that we fake on the state. Now it's time to make the UI behave to add these data elements on the selected numbers. Let's do that in the next video.